Just a small point on page 20 of 385, the first bullet, which talked about the limited assurance in respect of NHS Devon's financial position. It was due to the scale of the unmitigated risks, not the deficit.
So can you just highlight the paragraph number, Kay? I know you said page 20.
So it's 5.5.
5.5. Oh, right, second bullet point, I see.
Yeah.
So did you...
Yes.
Did you get do you want to just give us that wording again, Kay, that you want it changing to?
So instead of scale of the deficit, I think we would like deficit replaced with unmitigated risk.
Yeah, understand. That's helpful. Thanks. Is everybody happy with changing deficit to unmitigated risk? Thank you very much. Any other points that anyone would like to raise relating to the minutes? If not, then the board approves the minutes of the meeting of the 31st of July. If we now move to the action list, there are 7 actions here which are all in progress. The first 4 of those relate to board member requests for discussions at future board development sessions, those development sessions relating to the decommissioning schedule, population health management changes to the NHS oversight framework and the development of a cushioning plan. So we've previously agreed that the board will receive an update on this at its September meeting once the arrangements for the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly and Devon ICB cluster are finalised. So we'll bring those forward to September. The further 3 actions all have a target date of the end of September. So I propose that we receive updates on those at the end of September board meeting. Would everybody be happy with that as an outcome for these actions? In that case, we note the action register. And then we move on to item 2.1, which is titled Establishing Cluster Governance Arrangements. Now I'm going to ask Philippa to take us into this paper in a moment. What I am suggesting that we do, given that this is quite a complicated document, we're going to take each of the recommendations separately as Philippa goes through the report. So we'll discuss first of all the terms of reference, go to the recommendation, then we'll move on to the constitution and so on, and then take that recommendation in order that we stay focused on the item and don't start moving between them. But then I will just check in with the board at the end of it that having discussed it all, is there anything that anyone would like to go back to on any of the other recommendations? So we'll be very methodical about it as we go through the paper. So Philippa, can I ask you to introduce the paper, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Before I go into the paper, I think it's worth flagging that the board of NHS Cornwall and Isles of Scilly met this morning and considered exactly the same set of papers, with the difference being that they considered their own constitution and their own audit committee and remuneration committee terms of reference. As we went through the papers at the board meeting, which I was present at because I'm interim company secretary for Cornwall and Isles of Scilly as well, a number of amendments were agreed, which I will flag as I go through these documents as well. I don't consider any of them to be particularly controversial, but I think it's important that we try to get on as aligned a position as possible. The paper sets out a proposal to establish a joint committee between NHS Devon and NHS Cornwall and Isles of Scilly. This is a power that is available to both integrated care boards under sections 65Z5 and 65Z6 of the National Health Service Act 2006. The proposal is essentially that both boards delegate all functions that would normally be carried out by each board to the joint committee, which we're proposing is called the South West Peninsula Board. With the exception of those corporate governance functions which must be reserved to each board, and we've outlined those in the paper. So I propose that the first step is to look at the proposed terms of reference for the joint committee, and these are attached to Annex AI to the report. Also attached at Annex II is the proposed subgroups of this joint committee as well. So I wasn't going to go through the terms of reference in detail, but happy to receive any comments or questions.
Okay, so are there any questions relating to the terms of reference for the joint committee as set out as Annex AI? Okay, in that case, then the recommendation is that we approve the terms of reference for the South West Peninsula Board for implementation when the cluster chair appointment is confirmed. Are we happy to agree that recommendation? Okay, and shall we just move on to the second recommendation, which is to approve the disestablishment of all existing board assurance committees from the 1st of September and the establishment of the new assurance groups for the cluster once the aligned non-executive members are appointed, and that's set out at Annex AII. Are there any questions relating to that? Frank?
In terms of can we agree it, I think yes, we just need to be absolutely certain and assured that any of the ongoing issues in those committees are transferred to the new cluster and picked up somewhere.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, Philip, have we got a process to do that?
Yes, so we intend to take September to work through the establishment of the new committees. None of the committees have terms of reference as yet, and we need to work through those and to work through a handover process. We would expect that the first formal meeting of the committee, once each committee has got its terms of reference, would also receive a handover document, and we'll work with the chairs of each existing committee to make sure that a handover document is prepared to the new committee, which incorporates key issues that have been considered by the committee during its lifetime or most relevant, risks that have been identified by each committee, outstanding actions that have yet to be completed, and I think a briefing note from the chair of that committee to capture any other particular issues of business that it's important for the new committees to be aware of.
Okay, so Graham next, please.
Well, this is just FYI, actually. So audit and risk committee was scheduled for meeting on Monday, and it will still meet on Monday. And in discussion with, particularly with Philippa, we will be paying particular attention to capturing the things that do need to be carried forward. So I think there was a good example of how I hope it will work.
Thanks, Graham. That's helpful. Okay, so with that clarification on how we, sorry, I didn't see you.
No, I've just put my hand up, Chair. Just when we look at mentioning the cluster arrangements to functions such as Health Watch England and Local Health Watch, presumably these be kept under review as those bodies change potentially?
Thanks, Penny. Okay, so with the clarification on how we will ensure that committee business is transferred from the former committees to the new committees, is everybody happy to agree with the recommendation that we disestablish all existing board assurance committees from the 1st of September and establish the new assurance groups for the cluster once the aligned non-executive members are appointed? Okay, thank you. Is there anything more you want to say on the Constitution, yes, Philippa?
Thank you. So to facilitate the cluster arrangement, we're making a number of proposed amendments to the constitutions of both organisations. As you'll recall, as we've recently been through the NHS Devon Constitution, this is for the board to review and agree proposed amendments to NHS England, and then NHS England will agree this. We have actually secured a slot at the regional executive team on Monday, the 1st of September. So subject to the board agreeing the proposed amendments, we would anticipate that these would be effective as of the 1st of September. I think key points that we're proposing in relation to the membership of the board are we're proposing an amendment to the partner member for local authorities. We currently have 2 partner members for local authorities, and we're proposing that we bring that down to 1. The proposal is that the cluster board or joint peninsula committee has a partner member, has a director of partner health. Apologies, director of public health. Representative in attendance from Devon at meetings rather than as a member. The other proposed amendment is that we remove the VCSE member from the board. We've never recruited to this member. Again, the proposal is that VCSE representative would be in attendance at cluster board meetings. And then I think the final point to make is at this point we're not proposing any amendments to the executive membership of the board. That is because this will be subject to consultation as part of the organisational change programme and will be proposed for amendment once that consultation process has been concluded. I think those are probably, the key points to raise in relation to the constitutional proposed changes.
Thanks, Philippa. So, do we have any questions or observations on the proposals relating to the ICB constitution changes? Donna.
Yeah, just check for clarification that as my understanding there would be a representative from either Devon, Plymouth and Torby on the board and a local government representative from Cornwall and Niles of Scilly. Is that correct?
There will be a local authority partner member on the Devon board and a local authority partner member on the Cornwall board, and both will be invited to join the joint peninsula cluster board.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I think it may be helpful to get that in the wording. It's just not quite clear. And then, just for clarification, it is the view of the local government partners representing the current 3 authorities that although there is one person on the board, that the other members would like to be in attendance at the board. So I'd just like clarification on, how that request will be addressed and at what point. And it's in particular recognition that with everyone going through LGR, that we need everyone in that space. And actually, it's an enhanced commitment from local government partners to attend these meetings.
Thanks, Donna. Philippa, do you want to take that point?
Yes, thank you, Donna, and really welcome the engagement of local authority partners in this. Once the chair of the cluster is announced and is in post, I am sure that they will want to have that discussion with local authority partner members to see how best to bring them into attendance at cluster board meetings. I think we'll see a slightly different approach to how local authority partner members are asked to contribute to board meetings as well. I think that potentially a slightly more formalisation of a reporting process as well to make sure that we're getting those perspectives around the table. So absolutely happy to take that away as an action to make sure that once the cluster chair is appointed that this is something that's foremost in their to-do list.
Yeah, that's good if it can be taken as a formal request from local government. And just finally, can I just ask about the expectations about how there is balance in children's and adult services being represented on this board, as in making sure that there's balance to that across the peninsula. I'm just interested in how that will be achieved.
Thanks, Donna. Philippa, do you want to address that?
As currently, the proposal is that the local authority partner member for the Devon board is a chief executive or board level partner member. I think given your previous comment, Donna, we would expect that it would probably be a chief executive for one of the partners. And so I would expect that they would bring their perspectives. I think once we've confirmed the executive members of each of Devon and Cornwall boards as well, then we'll be able to confirm how those executive members of each board will be able to represent both children and adult services as well.
Thank you. And finally, just the last point of clarification.
Donna, could I just bring Penny in on your last point? Sorry, okay, sorry. No, back to you, Donna. Sorry, Penny doesn't need to come in now.
Yeah, I suppose my final question is, could I have an assurance of where safeguarding will be for adults and children's, and how in the Constitution for clarification? I'm just I'd like to hear that clarified today, where safeguarding will be.
Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. So for assurance, although it's not reflected in these papers, that absolutely is part of the organisational design process. It's very explicit in the structure of the executive part of the organisation, where those things will sit and who will be responsible for them.
Thanks, Donna. Penny.
So it's a question unrelated to Donna. So under membership 4.1, core membership, it's representation from non-exec, chief exec, chair, chief officers for finance, chief officers for people, regular attendees. When clinical or quality issues are on the agenda, the cluster chief nursing officer and medical directors will be in attendance. Can I confirm if that will be, so that won't be voting, presumably? And also, if we are talking about quality being the cornerstone of the delivery of the ICB, I would say quality should weave through all discussions.
Philippa.
And we provide clinical services.
Yeah, so Penny, I think you're looking at the terms of reference for the transition steering group rather than the constitution.
Apologies.
That's okay. Happy to respond to that point though as well. I think the transitional steering group is a transactional delivery group at this point in time, and will morph, and I would envisage that we would see a different membership as we go forward, but this is very much how do we get to the next point of the cluster process. So how do we get to the point of being able to launch a consultation on organisational change and so on.
That's reassuring. Obviously I would some of my points remain true even in that process, but that's reassuring. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other points that anyone would want to make relating to the proposals for the ICB constitution? In that case, are we happy to approve the proposed amendments to the current ICB constitution for submission to NHS England for approval? Sorry, Philippa.
Apologies. I neglected to highlight an amendment that the Cornwall board asked for this morning in relation to the principles that are set out in the constitution. So I just need to find the section. Apologies. Section 7. I just need to get there. So essentially, the Section 7 sets out the principles in which underpinning the way in which the Integrated Care Board will operate, and the current principles set out that 7.21 set out that the ICB will operate in relation to comprehensive and joined up working, economical time and money, clear and transparent, rigorous, stable and consistent. The Cornwall board suggested that it would be helpful to make greater use of the reference to the Nolan principles, the importance of being able to speak up, and other points along those lines. What I would suggest is, if you're happy, is rather than read through them, because there's quite a few there, if the board is happy to confirm that with the chair that they're appropriate, that we add those as proposed amendments as well to continue the alignment of the two constitutions.
Okay, is the board happy for work to be continued on that and to be agreed separately to this meeting? Okay, thanks. Lopa.
Thank you, Chair. Philippa, having brought up the principles, the one that was missing for me under the A to E was also about equality and inclusion. And I wondered if that should also be included to align us with Cornwall. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, Luke, I believe that's included as well. So yes, happy to include that.
Okay, thank you. So subject to those amendments suggested by the Cornwall ICB board, Cornwall and Isles of Scilly ICB board this morning, are we happy for the board to approve the proposed amendments to the current ICB constitution for submission to NHS England for approval? Okay, thank you. That's then approved. I should add actually that I was also in the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly ICB board meeting this morning, and I'd see that John Govet, the chair of Cornwall and Isles of Scilly, has joined our meeting this afternoon. So welcome, John. Welcome to the meeting. So Philippa, do you want to take us into the single scheme of reservation and delegation?
Yes, thank you. So Annex C to the report sets out the proposed shared scheme of reservation and delegation for both boards. This was considered by the Cornwall board this morning, and one small proposed amendment is that the scheme refers to at least one board meeting per year, and we propose to amend it to a minimum of 2 board meetings per year. I think it's worth flagging that we would envisage that where there are issues that require the attention of a single ICB board, then ad hoc meetings can be arranged if necessary, but don't envisage a significant number of those. I think the other thing that it's worth flagging in relation to the scheme of reservation and delegation is that work will continue in terms of the operational scheme of delegation and standing financial instructions to ensure that these are aligned across both integrated care boards in advance of the implementation of the new committee structure as well.
Thanks, Philippa. So any questions on the single scheme of reservation and delegation, or any questions on the amendments proposed out of Cornwall and Isles of Scilly this morning? Lopa.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the scheme of reservations and delegation, it's not directly related to it, but just for noting that whistleblowing process will continue to be in place, and for both ICBs and I presume the joint cluster as well. It's just for noting, I guess.
Thanks, Lopa. Philippa.
Yes, thank you, Lopa. And I think it's worth highlighting that whistleblowing or freedom to speak up is a core responsibility of each audit committee of each individual ICB. Each ICB is required to have a freedom to speak up policy, and so we will maintain the separate freedom to speak up policies for both boards as well. And then I would envisage, as we move towards committee meetings in common, that we would seek to align those policies over time as well.
Thanks, Philippa. Any other points anyone wants to raise on the proposed scheme of reservation and delegation? Okay, then, is the board then happy to approve the revised single scheme of reservation and delegation as set out at Annex C, subject to the amendments proposed out of the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly ICB board this morning? Okay, thank you. That's approved. And now, transition agreement, Philippa.
Yes, thank you. So again, I think it's helpful for a transition agreement to set out key design principles for the cluster arrangement. This is something that we would expect to be kept under review over time. I think it's important to reflect the fact that, with apologies to the board, because of the pace at which we're working, I think an outdated version of the transition agreement made its way into the papers. And this is particularly important in relation to risk sharing and the reference to risk sharing in the transition agreement. So the proposal is that risk sharing only relates to costs associated with transition, and Kirsty, CFO, might want to come in a little bit more detail on this because she'll be much more au fait with the details of this. We have some proposed alternative wording to address this. This is obviously an issue of key concern to the Cornwall board, and absolutely in line with what we intended to put into the transition agreement, but didn't quite make it into the final paper. So apologies for that. But Kirsty, if you wanted to.
Yeah, so the risk sharing really is in two areas. One is transition and cost of change. And then obviously when we move into a new structure, the cost of delivering that new structure will also be on an agreed shared basis as well. But that's the only bit that will be shared. Otherwise, the Devon and Cornwall pound will be kept completely separate, reported separately, are allocated separately, have separate plans. So it will only be the one area that we'll be looking at.
Thanks, Kirsty. Thanks, Philippa. So that's an important, really, really important amendment that we're making to it, actually, and it was an issue that was discussed at the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly board this morning, so thank you for updating us on that.
Thank you. And my suggestion, recommendation to the board is that rather than approving the transition agreement as it is currently, the board delegates authority to the Chair and Chief Executive, as advised by the CFO and Director of Governance, to approve those amendments. We'll circulate them in correspondence as well, just to make sure everyone sees them, but just to make sure that we get the right wording that both organisations are happy with.
Thanks, Philippa. Graham.
Thank you. I think all the documents before us today are important to get right. But I think this is the most important one, since the other ones could in due course be amended if need be. Whereas this one, I think I, for one, would really want to make sure it's right. I think it is right, but just a couple of questions, please. First, I think I see the fingerprint of a lawyer on it, and I see some of the wording that is pretty classic of best endeavours and the like. So can I just check that that is indeed the case? On the risk sharing piece, I note that that hasn't been put in place yet, and we've got a target date of the 1st of October. I would encourage PACE to put that in place as soon as possible. We want this to work. Actually, despite putting provisions in for what happens if it doesn't, that in reality will be quite difficult. I don't know whether any thought had been given to penalising in terms of breach. And my last point is I see reference that if disputes arise, to the extent that it's related to delegated services from NHS England, it would be referred back to NHS England. Why isn't it any dispute reference back to NHS England? So those are sort of just questions, really. They're not, to me, fundamental. I do support this, by the way.
Thank you, Graham. Philippa, would you like to address Graham's points?
Yes, thank you, Graham. Yes, I can confirm that we have sought external advice on this from a legal firm. So yes, that's why you see you see the drafting as it is. I think in relation to your question around dispute resolution, apologies. I think it certainly was the intention that NHS England would be a source of escalation in the point of dispute resolution. So if that's not clear in the document as it stands, I'm happy to take that away as and strengthen that.
Okay.
Apologies, I can't remember the other points.
Breach and penalties. Just because we want to make this work, we really want to incentivise people to make this successful.
Yes.
I know it sounds perverse having a breach penalty, but
yes,
it focuses the mind no end and making it work.
I think that's one for the board to comment on, Graham.
Okay.
That's an hospital.
Sorry, it is not meant to be a hand grenade.
So views on penalties in terms of breaches, Graham's point, any views, Kay?
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to. There was another question from me, but happy to reflect. I I always feel conflicted in this sort of area because we do want it to work, don't we? As you say, Graham. And so there's something about starting off with where we expect to end, and if it ever got to the point where one party felt the need to walk away or it didn't work, then I'm not good to get your view on that. I'm not convinced that any sort of penalty would change that. So what I'm questioning is what's the sort of behaviour we're trying to stop, and would the penalty actually make a difference? I suppose that's where I'm getting to.
Thanks. I'm going to bring Steve in. I know Lopa and Tandy want to come in as well, but Steve, can we take your view on it, please?
Yeah, it's really tested the grey cells, that question, but I think I was going to say pretty much the same as Kay, that I can't think of a penalty that would force either a different behaviour or a more satisfactory outcome. I do think maybe there is something we could reflect about if we got to the point where we thought there was an absolute difference of opinion, shall we say, on a matter of substance, that we may need to consider how we might use an arbitration process through NHS England, but such a process doesn't really exist. So I think it would be quite difficult to put it in the transitional agreement, but maybe it's something we ought to pick up with the region as a sort of theoretical exercise for them.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, Steve. I mean, I'm not sure where else we put penalties in for breaches of agreements in the NHS at the moment. It would be a kind of one-off in the current climate, I think, Graham. But I've got Lopa, Tandy, and then I've got Frank. So Lopa first, please.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding is that the agreement is actually not lawful. It's not a legal document, so I would welcome any clarification on. Although it's written with a legal perspective, it is actually not something you can take into a court and challenge under the law. Therefore, it's actually a mutual agreement. So my perspective on penalties is possibly they wouldn't be effective, but maybe sweeteners might be better. And the other issue, I think I have raised this previously with Philippa as well, is that arbitration, although we don't have an arbitration process within the NHS, there is arbitration processes available nationally, and we should certainly consider making the use of those, where there is disputes. So just two observations, really. Thank you.
Thanks, Lopa. Let's take Tandy's point and Frank's point, and then we'll try and get to a position on this. Tandy.
Yes. So the dispute resolution is one of the issues I raised in my contribution. But having raised it, I think I'm now getting a bit confused with it now. When we say breach, who have we got in mind that will be breaching? Because I think I was thinking of it as a disagreement rather than a breach, which eventually should be arrived at via consensus, because even if it's just a transitional committee, it is still, in my mind, one thing that I'm not very sure that we would be able to penalise one side or the other, because really on paper, we should just have that one, even if it's transition. So I think that conversation around breach is a little bit confusing now, as in who are we holding in breach if not the committee itself to itself?
Yeah, that's a fair point, Tandy. Let's just hold that one as well and bring Frank in, and then I'll come back to Philippa in a moment for a way forward on it.
So, obviously, this is about transition, and we're all starting from different places. The risk sharing, I can understand why people are very concerned about it. But ultimately, we've got to think that within about a year, we want to be thinking as one entity in the Southwest Peninsula. And it's how we get to that position, I think, is more important than assuming that somebody might default and therefore have to look at the risk sharing on it. We are going to be one cluster and then one ICB, and we have to start thinking like that.
Thanks. Really good point. A really good point, Frank. So, so Philip, I'm really keen we don't overcomplicate this actually. Do you want to kind of give us a proposed way forward, having listened to all of the contributions?
Yes. So I think, so my suggestion is that I think other than the concept of penalties, I think the transition agreement already covers them. I think the point about arbitration, I think, is one that's well made, but I think it's one that you would expect NHS England to be taking us towards if we found ourselves in that situation. So I think it's helpful additive rather than required in the transition agreement. And Lopa, you're right. Again, it is an agreement between two parties rather than a contract or anything that has that similar legal binding nature. I think Kay's perspective was, sorry, I can't remember who it was now, that said that this is something that we need to be thinking about how we encourage behaviours rather than penalise behaviours is very helpful. That was Lopa again, so yes, thank you. And I think, again, I would hope and expect that the move towards the cluster arrangement is very much like the European Union used to be, of the ever closer union, that this is the first step towards a closer union and an eventual merger. So I think I would suggest that the transition agreement as it stands is sufficient, but I think the sentiments that have been expressed are helpful to test it.
Thanks, Philippa. So Graham, back to you after having had that conversation. Thanks for asking the questions. It's been useful to articulate all of that. Are you happy with Philippa's proposed way forward?
I did say at the beginning of my part that I am content with it as it stands. And what I just wanted to make sure is that some thinking has been done. I absolutely agree. A positive can-do approach. These agreements, though, do always tend to have elements of what happens if. And so I was just really testing the what happens if. Yeah. I think I'm more than happy to support the document as it stands.
Thank you, Graham. That's really, really helpful. So is the board then in a position to approve the transition agreement set out at Annex D in the papers, subject to amendments relating to the risk share agreement, which Philippa is proposing? We delegate the sign-off of that to the Chair and Chief Executive. Is everyone happy to approve the transition agreement on that basis? Kay.
Chair, thank you. And I am happy to approve it. So this isn't, my comment is a comment rather than a not happy to approve it. And my reflection is a timing one. So this transition agreement, our expectation is that we formally merge on the 1st of April 2027. And we're about to go into a significant period of work around medium-term planning. So I'm just thinking about how do we give the ICB team sufficient cover and knowledge of how we're going to do medium-term planning across Devon and Cornwall and Isles of Scilly during the transition period, because we've just got this slightly awkward timing issue, haven't we? And I was reading the transition agreement. It talks in section 8 about reviewing the transition period the transition agreement after 6 months, which takes us to the 1st of March. I wondered if that was insufficient in terms of timing for planning purposes. So do we need some sort of a almost bespoke transition piece around how we do medium-term planning across Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly?
Thank you, Kay. I'm going to ask Steve to respond to that.
Yeah, well, I think we probably could spend a bit more time on this, Kay, and it's certainly going to be, I'm sure for the cluster, is going to be a key issue about effectively how we keep all the plates spinning through not just one organisational change, but an ongoing change, as you say, at least for the next 18 months until the point of merger, and then arguably there will still be more to come after that. So a period of instability, shall we say, and uncertainty for people. I think the things I would say in relation to that, but I think they are worthy of a deeper discussion for the proposed new South West Peninsula Board, is the faster we can get things established, the faster we can get through the initial organisational change, the better certainty that gives to everybody. clearly the longer that gets extended, the more it becomes difficult to maintain both the motivation and focus on things. And that's clearly something which has been absolutely behind the pace setting I think that Devon and Cornwall have done in relation to ICB clustering and the organisational change announced back in March. It feels like we are pushing the envelope probably more than most. I think the other thing to say is that in reality for the planning round, which is now actually we're in the midst of doing, including our development of the medium-term financial plan and the strategy, both existing ICBs are working on those in parallel, and we need to continue to make sure that that happens. Clearly, we've done some, as the board will be aware, some assurance around aligning those by having, for example, Cornwall members in our strategy discussion, but it will be imperfect for now, and for next year, as we go into giving the signals out for next year to our providers around our commissioning intentions, they will look like slightly separate things, although I would hope they would be broadly similar in scope. It may just be more about emphasis and degree of progress that can be made in some areas. I think where the real hard yards will then come is, as we get into 26-27, is that we establish a single planning process for the whole of that year in order to get to 27-28 in a merged organisation with a single set of refreshed strategic commissioning intentions, single refreshed medium-term financial plan and an organisational structure that speaks to how that gets delivered. So I think there's an awful lot of risk in all of that, but it is acknowledgement. I think we're trying to mitigate those risks through all the actions we're currently taking as far as we're able to.
Does that give you the clarification that you were seeking, Kay?
Yes, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kay. So if there are no further questions on that, then are we happy to approve the transition agreement subject to an amendment to the risk sharing paragraph, which we're suggesting is delegated to the Chair and Chief Executive for sign-off, having circulated it to everybody? Okay, then that is approved. Back to Philippa, and we're on to the terms of reference for the Audit Committee and the Remuneration Committee.
Thank you. So, as I've mentioned, the Audit Committee and the Remuneration Committee are two committees which every ICB is required to maintain. We're proposing that each board maintains its own Audit Committee and Remuneration Committee. However, we envisage that the majority of these meetings will probably be committees in common, in which case it felt that it would be appropriate to align the terms of reference for both organisations to facilitate that. The proposed amendments are in line with the model terms of reference for both committees. So I think it's just a tidying exercise as much as anything.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or observations on the proposed revisions to the terms of reference for the Audit Committee and the Remuneration Committee? Okay, if there are no questions, then are we happy to approve the revised terms of reference for the Audit Committee? Thank you. And are we happy to approve the revised terms of reference for the Remuneration Committee? Okay, thank you. The next recommendation relates to approval of minor modifications. Do you want to say anything about that, Philippa?
Yes, I think it's worth flagging that the drafting of the recommendation was a little loose and needs to be tightened up to reflect the fact that the modifications that are proposed are minor, and it's envisaged, so as we've been working through this at pace and as being in the forefront of this work, there's the possibility that we might be directed by NHS England regional team or national team to make some slight amendments to what we've done, and just wanted to give the cluster chair, once appointed, the authority to approve those modifications as subject to them being minor, because rather than having to bring them back to the boards.
But we'd inform the full board of any amendments which have been approved by the chair. Would everyone be happy to approve that recommendation to delegate to the cluster chair, once appointed, the authority to approve minor modifications to these arrangements? Okay, thank you. And then, is there anything further you want to say on Transition Steering Group? We've touched on it a bit in other discussion, but is there anything you want to add, Philippa?
I think it's worth noting the point that Penny made about the importance of clinical and quality input into the decision making. I think it's worth emphasising that the terms of reference as they're currently articulated are probably worth seeing as transitional in themselves, and we would expect them to be reviewed within the next few months as we get greater clarity in relation to executives and chair appointments for the cluster. So happy to take that into account as we get to that point.
Are there any further questions or observations on the terms of reference for the transition steering group? Frank?
It was just whether having one NEM on that group is enough to challenge.
Philippa?
So we also have the cluster chair as a non-executive as well, if that's helpful.
Sorry, I was aware the cluster chair was on there as well. But I mean, if you think it's enough, that's fine. But it's a very small group and it's going to be doing an awful lot of work very quickly without possibly much challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think reflecting the comments that Philippa said, that this is going to continue to evolve actually quite quickly, quicker than would be normal. It's also not a committee, it's a steering group, so it's to help us ensure that we're on track with things. So it isn't there really for assurance, it's there for doing the work, but having non-exec insight into that is helpful. So I think it's a different type of group than the others, but we'll keep it under review.
And Philippa?
I think just worth adding to that the requirement that's referenced in the report that from NHS England that a transitional committee is established has been interpreted by ICBs in different ways, and in fact a number of ICBs have set up transition committees that have effectively the same terms of reference as the joint committee that we're establishing. So I think it's worth conceptualising them as two transitional committees. One's a working group and one's the body that will be taking the decisions.
Thanks, Philippa. And Lopa?
Thank you, Chair. Given that it is a task and finish type of group, I wondered if we wanted to articulate an end date for the group. Or did one? I know number 10 says effective date until will remain in force until it's revoked. But if we've got a transition plan, it sometimes helps focus a group if it's got an end date.
Thanks, Lopa. Philippa, any thoughts on that?
Yes, so we're working towards a merger date of the 1st of April 2027. So the committee terms of the group terms of reference tie to that. So I think it's worth just emphasising that a little bit more rather than going for a specific date. An outcome would probably be the best way.
Yeah, thanks, Philippa. Okay, so is the board happy to note the terms of reference for the transition steering group? Thank you. So I said before we started that we've gone through that very methodically, recommendation by recommendation, but I think it's just worth reflecting after all of that. Is there anything that anyone, now having discussed the whole of it, would want to raise about any of the recommendations? Salma?
Thank you, Chair. I initially raised my hand with regards to the earlier discussion, which was around the committees. But it stands as a general question as well, so I'll ask it now. It's just with regards to the corporate assurance, the corporate risk register and so the strategic registers. The previous committees that we've currently got clearly hold some of those risks. I'm just thinking, is there a formal process to hand over those risks as well? How will that work? Or do we just transfer it across? It'd be helpful to get some clarity on that, particularly the strategic risks.
Thanks, Salma. Philippa?
It's a really good question, Salma, and it's one that I'm still working through to a certain extent, to be honest. We will need to maintain separate risk registers for both organisations. However, I would also envisage that there would be a need for a cluster risk register as well. Quite how the practicalities of that will work, we need to work through over the next couple of weeks, so that it's something we envisage that the risks currently that sit with each of the committees will transition through those handover reports that we talked about earlier in the meeting. But there are also those corporate risks that don't go through to the committees that sit at the more executive level, that we need to make sure that we've got an appropriate system in place there. And we haven't quite got there yet, but it is absolutely something that we know we need to move towards.
Okay, thanks, Philippa. Lopa, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note how much work has been done on this and how complex the process is, and just to commend the team for the sheer attention to detail and trying to develop the arrangements that will help us get to a better place. So if we could note that, that would be really great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lopa, for that. And you're absolutely right. This has been a tremendous amount of work undertaken over a really short period of time. And so thanks, Philippa, for your leadership on it all. And thanks also to the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly team, who have been working really, really well with the Devon team. And thank you to everybody around the board table who over the past week has engaged really comprehensively with all of these documents and given us your views in order to enable today's meeting to go smoothly on this issue. So thank you, everybody. So we can now move on to item 3.1, which is the NHS Devon annual report and accounts for 24-25, which the board has previously considered in private, but we're bringing it in public today. Steve.
Yeah, I'm just going to say a few words, just given what you've said, Chair, that this has been something that's been scrutinised through various different fora up to date, but good to be receiving it in public. Clearly, the report itself recognises the work and progress that the organisation has made in the last year. It does feel a bit, reading it, like the last year was a different world given the speed with which we're changing right now, but I think provides a really good summary of both the things that we've achieved, but also the challenges that we still have, and of course will then go in, those challenges then being bequeathed to our new cluster arrangements. I just wanted to call out, I just think it's worth reflecting, and I think it says some words to this effect in the letter we received around our RSP exit, which is on page 383 or 385. Again, I think the reflection that we exited RSP despite all the challenges that we had, again, is a huge reflection on the work and professionalism of both the ICB in that time, but also across the system. And it does say to spend a moment, take a moment to acknowledge the improvements, which I would encourage us all to do, and certainly I did when I received it. I'd also like to thank everyone who's contributed, particularly Philippa and the whole governance team, to pull together what is quite a monumental set of documents to make this work, and have done it at the same time of all the things that we've just been talking about here and the development of all of that, that new ways of working. So just to call out what a remarkable governance team we have, and an organisation behind us who is able to do these things even in the most difficult circumstances. I will share, with your permission, just going to ask Kirsty just to introduce the accounts, recognising that they too have been through significant scrutiny through different fora within the ICB.
Thank you. Yeah, so these are the accounts for 24-25, which does seem a long time ago. So 3.2 billion was the allocation, and we had a planned surplus of 28 million, which we did deliver. So we delivered on plan. We also met our running costs, duties, our cash duties, and our better practice payment code as well. Head of internal audit opinion was satisfactory, and the accounts were unqualified by the auditors. However, there is recognition around the Devon system and the financial sustainability of the system, and the fact that it's in recovery, and that was reflected in having a significant weakness on the financial sustainability rating, but otherwise everything was all good.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Kirsty. Any questions, observations on the annual report and accounts and annual assessment of NHS Devon and the exit from the recovery support programme? So, so I'd just like to say thank you to the finance team. I mean, I was in the audit committee when the auditors, the external auditors, were saying just how smoothly the audit had gone because of the work of the finance team. So, please do give the board's thanks to your finance team, Kirsty. And you know, I'm particularly delighted, I have to say, about the head of internal audit opinion moving to satisfactory. And I'd like to thank Graham actually for his oversight of all of that as chair of the audit committee over the last couple of years, and as Steve said, to the governance team for steering us through that to get it to a satisfactory audit opinion. And thanks to Steve and the exec team for the way you've steered us through the recovery support programme and its exit. And it is really good. I have to say, at this meeting, which it will be the last meeting of this board with the current membership, to have received that notification from NHS England. So thanks to all of the execs for the work that's got us to this point today. Okay. So, questions from members of the public. Do we have any questions from the public today?
No, we've not received any.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to any other business. I did want to say something, but is there any other business from any other members of the board today? So if not, then I just want to acknowledge that you know, the delegation agreement that we've made to the cluster committee today does mean that this board, whilst it will meet, as we've agreed, a minimum of 2 times each year, it won't meet again with the membership that we've got around the table today. We are expecting the appointment of a cluster chair imminently, hopefully in the next day or so. And following that, we'll also have the appointment of non-executive members to the Devon board and to the cluster board. So this is the last time that we'll meet with this membership, and I do just want to say, you know, as the person who's been the chair for the last 15, 16 months or so, it's just been just a great privilege to work with you all. Actually, this has just been an excellent team of people to work with, and I want to thank all of you for the energy, expertise, and commitment that you've brought to this, and I wish you all well for the next stage of the journey. Thank you very much, everybody. And on that, Josh, I think we can close the meeting.